Ooh. There's only 3 people on. Mm-hmm.
Do you get marked down only having 3?
Now you're ruining my stream. It's on right now. I'm gonna wait for some people to get on. I'm starting a little early. I'm starting at 4:59, so just one person. Look at the lighting's back. Text in the chat if you can hear me and see me. Oh, there's 2 people now. Camera's bad. It's okay. Oh, 4 people. Text in the chat. Say hi. Can you guys hear me too? Ooh, 5. All right. Getting there. How's your guys' day going? Okay. 5 people. It's okay, guys. Don't be shy. You can text in the chat. That would help me a lot. I don't want to just sit here awkwardly. I want to start. All right. You know what? 2 people. Okay. I'm just going to go ahead and get started then. So here we go. 156 years. A lot can happen in 156 years. Industrial Revolution, imperialism, World War, 2 world wars, a Great Depression, Civil Rights Movement, and the list just goes on. But somehow in the midst of all this time, one thing seemed to be forgotten: the enslavement of Black people. Not only has the government not given any reparations for this atrocity, they've had multiple opportunities to do so. Therefore, the federal government should have a restricted role when it comes to slave reparations, and rather local governments and the public, including public and private institutions and businesses, should have a big part in carrying out reparations for Black people. Hi, my name is Boston Graff, and I will be arguing for the limited involvement by the federal government in slave reparations. First, we'll look at why there's a need for reparations. Second, discuss the history of African Americans, and then why the federal government should have limited involvement in possible ways reparations could be carried out. At first thought, many may think of slave reparations as something that isn't really needed and something that just wouldn't be smart for the economy. And this is similar to how I thought at first. But with research, I found that this conclusion just is an unwise assumption. The call for reparations isn't just a greedy call for help from the Black community, but is rather something backed by facts. According to the Federal Reserve, quote, Black families' median and mean wealth is less than 15% that of white families, at $24,000 and $142,000, respectively, end quote. Whereas white families' median and mean incomes were at $188,000 and $983,000. Also, the facts have shown that the average net worth of white families is $171,000 compared to $17,000 for Black families. That's nearly 10 times more. I mean, just look at this graph. I don't know if you guys can see this graph, but this line down here, that's Black. That's the Black average net worth. And this green line up here, that's white average net worth. I mean, huge difference there. Even if you don't believe reparations are needed for African Americans, you can't deny that there's an obvious problem. There's no possible way this large of a wealth gap is an accident. The huge disparity in wealth among Black people has been apparent throughout American history and continues to plague the United States and the Black people within it. Something needs to be done, and a good step would be to economically help those negatively affected by slavery and segregation. Slave reparations have been a topic in America's history that has come and gone through time. But the cry for reparations is due to continuous discrimination and unequal opportunity Blacks have faced. The first horrible event African Americans faced, yes, there was more than one, was slavery. Like we all learned in our first history class, American slavery was forced labor of African people. As this went on for hundreds of years, African Americans had no means of building wealth, whereas their white slave owners did. Finally, slavery was abolished in 1865, not that long ago, and they were finally promised an opportunity to build wealth. Unfortunately, Reconstruction was mostly a failure, and their basic rights were stripped from them, beginning the Jim Crow era. During this time, opportunities to build wealth were near impossible for Black people. They couldn't participate in programs of the New Deal or GI Bill, and redlining was used to segregate Black people, not allowing them to buy houses in certain areas. Not to mention, mass incarceration has also led to the racial wealth gap. Mass incarceration has led to less economic opportunities for African Americans in recent years. Like I said, the racial wealth gap was no coincidence, and these were the reasons why. African Americans have never had a fair opportunity to build wealth. So at this point, if you think reparations are bad because it would give Black people an advantage, maybe think of the hundreds of years that they are at a disadvantage. It may be time to repay for these centuries of discrimination and unequal opportunity, because even if slavery and Jim Crow aren't going on today, it still has a huge impact on everyone's life, whether you realize it or not. Now that I've dealt with what the problem is and what caused it, I want to argue for the limited involvement by the federal government in reparations. According to the Pew Research Center, public trust in the government has gone from 77% in 1965 to its lowest ever, 24% in 2021. This common distrust towards the federal government could lead to problems when dealing with reparations, because reparations is one of those topics that is very touchy with certain people, and that distrust in the federal government could just lead to more problems. The most significant reason, though, is because the failed opportunities when dealing with reparations by the federal government. The most obvious time they failed was after Civil War. The famous 40 acres and a mule was something that was never delivered to newly freed slaves. Another time was during the New Deal coalition, and more specifically, the GI Bill and Social Security. With a chance to finally economically aid African Americans, these two federal benefits were denied to Black people, putting them further into economic turmoil, while their white counterparts economically prospered. Not only did they fail to help when they had the chance, in the present day, there is no effort to create reparations by the federal government. The bill H.R. 40 was proposed to research and study reparations, but has never been voted on. It was proposed 30 years ago, yet is still ignored. This lack of initiative for reparations is a huge reason why they should not have a big role. Obviously, because it's the federal government, if the issue picked up enough steam, they would and should be involved. But local governments and the public should have the majority of the role when it comes to Black reparations. Reparations have already been happening around the country by state and local governments. For example, in 2015, Chicago passed a bill that, quote, calls for $5.5 million in financial compensation, end quote, along with other programs for African Americans who were tortured by police. Also in California, AB 3121 has been passed, in which a committee will study reparations and present possible ways in which reparations could take place in California. Not only are governments giving reparations, but also American institutions, such as Georgetown. At Georgetown, they, quote, created a fund that would raise $400,000 annually to benefit the descendants of almost 300 enslaved people sold by the college in the 1830s, end quote. These are examples and proof that local governments and public institutions, such as colleges, can and have a responsibility for reparations. Certain ways proposed, like the 2% rule by Robert Smith, CEO of Vista Equity Partners, are ways the public and private companies can assist with reparations. Pretty much this rule states that 2% of net income in major U.S. corporations could go towards reparations. That would add up to $25 billion a year. Other ways for reparations, such as paid college tuition, forgiveness of student loan debt, down payment on house grants, housing revitalization, business grants, and there are many other possible ways for reparations to be taken place. But the federal government has failed to ever make up for these atrocities of slavery and it's time for local governments and us to step up to the task. In conclusion, African Americans have never had it easy. They still feel the repercussions of slavery and the Jim Crow era. Economically, there's a huge gap between Black and white families, and it can be traced back to the unfair treatment that went on and still goes on today. Due to the federal government's failure to help, local governments and citizens should be responsible for reparations. We cannot sit and wait for others to do it for us. Instead, we need to get up and right the wrongs of our ancestors. After 156 years, America has come a long way. America has done many great things, and it's time for it to do another by correcting its ugly past and lifting up its Black citizens. Thank you.